Newer homes, it's more of a punch list, probably what did not get done quite properly, but most of the newer homes, it's probably, I like to say, nickel and dime fixes.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have a challenge with buyers when I'm explaining, because I'm always explaining the process, we're always, part of what we do is our job as realtors is we make sure that you know what you're looking forward to, some of the expectations of a buyer. And so can you explain how the process works for those viewers that are maybe not sure of how a home inspection would go? Who calls you? How does it scheduled? When do they come? Can you, not going too much in the weeds, but if you can give an overview of that.
Normally a buyer calls me and we set it up that for a time that works for me and the buyer for the home inspection. And I like to be in the house maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours by myself, so I don't get disturbed and don't have 101 questions and get distracted. And then at the end of my work, the buyer and the buyer's realtor comes and we do a quick walkthrough and go over all my findings.
Yeah. By the way, when you mentioned, you were talking about common issues, you brought up the electrical. One of the things that comes to mind all the time is double tapping. And sometimes when I hear buyers hear that, sometimes I feel that they like, what is that? Is my house, is it gonna burn down? And I think, Dell, it's very important to me as a realtor not to hold anything back. It's very important not to hold anything back from the buyer, that they should know everything and they should know them in detail. But along with it is the bedside manners of also explaining in context, like what does that mean? Because for a new buyer is gonna think, oh my gosh, my house is gonna burn down. But double tap, what do you think? Do you see that on 80% of the houses, 70%?
Probably more than 80%.
And what does that mean, what double tapping?
So most manufacturing specifications on a breaker says you can only have one wire per breaker. So if there's more than one wire, one could be loose and cause an arc or a spark. But I see it all the time, and to me, it's not that big of an issue. And if a buyer does not like the double tap, an electrician come, and within 5-10 minutes of him arriving at the job, the fix is done. That's how easy of a fix it is.
Yeah. And this is, sometimes I think of this is why you also need to have a good realtor in conjunction with a good home inspector too, is you make sure your realtor is explaining or asking the questions to the inspector to find out, is this a big issue? Of course, if you have a seasoned realtor, they'll probably already know that, okay, yeah, if you have negative grade along the side of your house, you just need to get some dirt up against it. But then talk to a guy like Dell, because maybe there's not a simple solution. Maybe the siding is too low or something like that.
Normally it's pretty easy fixes, and a good seasoned realtor will be right there walking through the home inspection, and most of them will, like when I explain, hey, there's a double tap breaker, more than one wire on a breaker, the realtor will come in and say, so what is the fix for that, Dell? And then I explain, and then it puts the buyer's mind to ease. So it helps.
And of course too, you don't also want a buyer coming back and saying he missed this and he missed that. I think inevitably everybody misses something. I don't think it's possible. You can't have x-ray vision and see through the walls. You can't see insulation. And
for sure. I never say I found everything wrong with this house, because it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And my opinion, the key of a home inspection is finding things that will cause you money in the long run or more harm to the home. The major stuff is what we look for.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe tell us, Dell, what are some of the things that you have seen that are really expensive, big ticket items that you've caught or that you look for? Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
I was in a house, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I pulled up to the house and I could see that the roof was sagging a little bit. So I went and did my thing, and when I went on the main floor, I was like, there should be a wall right here that somebody took out. And then I went in the attic, and yeah, it was a load-bearing wall, and it was starting to sag a little bit. So somebody took out a load-bearing wall they weren't supposed to, and didn't add some extra support. And that was probably a pretty big fix to get that remedied.
A lot of times you'll go on roofs,
Yes.
Of course, if it's a super steep roof and it's snowy, there's certain limitations.
Correct.
Maybe could you talk to the viewers about some of the limitations that you don't do, that you don't cover? Because I think sometimes there's a misconception for buyers that everything is inspected, but there's certainly limitations. Can you explain?
Yeah, for sure. Like today it's snowy and icy, so the inspection I'm going to do today, I'm probably not going to be able to go on the roof because even if you go on the roof, it's all full of snow and ice. So what are you going to really see?
Yeah.
So that's a limitation. And you can't see behind the walls or behind the sheetrock or behind the insulation, or if there's a closet full of stuff. Obviously, I'm not pulling the personal items out to inspect that closet or a bedroom or utility room or whatever. So there are some limitations.
So a couple other things that I remember because, and I probably see this or think about this more because I deal with everything that's not covered or what was this. And so a couple of the things is sprinkler systems, air conditioners when it's this temperature and in the winter. Anything else that we're missing? Any other kind of appliances that you don't cover?
So washers and dryers are another thing. If it's requested to test them, I will, but if it's an occupied house, there's clothes in them, I'm not going to run them and test them because I don't know if it's part of the sale or not.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is frustrating, I see it from you and others too. No one likes people looking over their shoulder when they're working. And I think sometimes, what would you say the percentage of buyers or sellers that stay in the house while you're inspecting?
It's a real low percentage. I'm going to say maybe 5%.
Yeah. But you always prefer to just be able to just do your work and just be able to just carry on and not have to, because that delays the time. It can also, the buyer is not going to get as much of their value out of it if the whole time they're talking to the seller. Sometimes there can be some benefits too. Sometimes
You could ask the seller some questions and
Yeah.
they give some information they probably shouldn't. So it
Yeah.
is beneficial
Yeah.
at sometimes. But most of the time, because almost every home inspector takes pictures so you can put them in the report. And then the seller's always, why are you taking a picture of that? Why are you taking a picture of that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it delays.
Right. Yeah. And sellers are they're very concerned about someone coming through their house, and that's a big problem for them. But in the end, they have to realize they want the buyer's peace of mind too. A couple questions I have for you, distance-wise. So you are in the Bismarck-Mandan area,
Correct.
but I'm guessing you ventured further beyond the boundaries here, and that's probably almost a charity than to a realtor like me. Just because I know it's further distance and it's inconvenience, but tell us about how far you go and willing to go. And yeah.
I pretty much go throughout the whole state of North Dakota. I did some pretty big inspections this summer up in Watford City, Killdeer, went to Fargo a few times, some Jamestown ones. So a lot of small town North Dakota towns like Beulah, Hazen, Napoleon, Wishick area as well.
Yeah, and those inspectors or those areas typically don't have inspectors, or sometimes there's different opinions about home inspectors in those areas. I won't go into details, but I've heard sometimes that obviously, so you do this full time, so you're keeping current, you're constantly seeing things, you're knowing what to see. One thing I guess I'm going to talk to the viewers about a little bit, because I think that they should know why to get a home inspector. When I first owned my first home, we had nothing. I was the oldest of 9 kids, just recently married, and every buck I tried to save a buck, and I didn't get a home inspection on my first time. Fortunately, the person who owned it took extremely immaculate care of the place, but I realized how dangerous that was. And one of the reasons why I tell people that they need to get a home inspector, that it's very important to get a home inspector, is because on almost every deal that I put together as a realtor, I almost find the amount of money that they spend on a home inspector is probably double, triple, quadruple of what, not just what is potentially going to cost you money, but also that is the same amount of money or more that you can actually get in requesting some seller concessions from those issues. So it's very important and to get a home inspection, but it almost can pay for itself. I think it always pays for itself, but you can almost always get that from a negotiation with the seller after that inspection. So that's very important to me, Dell, and to most buyers. That's something that I think they need to keep in mind when they're
for sure.
buying a house.
Because when you're a potential purchaser, they don't go in the attic and check the insulation, make sure there's no condensation or mold issues in the attic, or they're not going to go on the roof and see if there's hail damage. So there's things that benefit for having a home inspector just rather than doing a visual.
What I tell my buyers too is it's not just some guy that's good at fixing stuff coming through. You guys have checklists. You have pictures you take, so you're documenting everything. You get a large report. Do you know how many pages? It varies, right?
Depends on the condition of the house. You're probably looking at anywhere from 30 pages to 65 pages, give or take.
Yeah. So that's all documentation where you can read through it. Another thing is you can ask a seller if you find something when your friend inspects it, but when you have documentation, when you have photos and you have a list, like you have everything right there, and you take that to the seller and say, a professional said this was a problem. That's very compelling and the seller just doesn't want to mess with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell us some of the most expensive things that you've seen, the most costly mistakes or costly issues.
Most costly issues are obviously foundation issues. If there's foundation issues, it gets quite expensive to fix it. If it's major, if it's minor. But shingling a roof right now is very expensive. New HVAC systems, new air conditioners is very expensive. So structural issues in a house is probably the most expensive repair you're ever going to have.
And when you're looking at structural issues, one of the things that I've seen is that you can have things that maybe appear structural but are not, and some things that may not appear structural or that you miss and that you find that they are. So let's talk, for example, what does structural mean? So if you have a concrete basement floor and it's heaving, it's cracking or whatever, versus a wall, cracks in walls, can you talk a little bit about what are some terrible things, horrible things versus like things that you could probably get by with?
Yeah, structurally things are like the foundation, the footing under the foundation, the load-bearing walls, the rafters. Like Will's talking about the slab in the basement, if it's heaving and settling, that has nothing to do with the structure of the house. You can actually build a house and not have a slab, and the house will just stand perfectly fine. The slab has no structural integrity at all. We look for bowing foundations, major cracks in the foundations, rafter issues, cracking and settling of the rafters. So all those are structural issues.
Yeah. And Dell, I'm talking to buyers all the time as a realtor. And so I will have things that I'll say that I think that they should look for in a home inspector. But from your perspective, looking backwards or looking the other way, what do you think a buyer should look for when they're looking for a home inspector?
I always get a kick out of when people call me, hey, Dell, how much do you charge for a home inspection? And then I tell them, and they, okay, thanks. And I always chuckle to myself because I think as a buyer, you should actually interview your home inspector. Some of the questions I think you should ask is, how long have you been a home inspector? How many home inspections have you done? What did you do prior to being a home inspector to make you a good home inspector? So those are some of the key questions. Price is a question too, but just because somebody's more expensive or cheaper doesn't make them a better or a worse home inspector either. Those are questions you should ask your home inspector.
So keeping on the price theme, the cost, so you can tell us what your rate is, and then maybe there's some variations depending on situations like mileage and that sort of thing, or do you have any, is a $1.5 million house the same as a condo? So
yeah, square footage is huge. Volume of bedrooms and bathrooms is huge. My typical home inspection is $375 to $400. If it's huge house, obviously it's going to be more. If it's out of town, in a different town, I charge $1 a mile per mile both ways. So there is some mileage charge as well.
Let's talk about rural properties out of town. they add some more complexity to inspections. Can you talk a little bit about what you look for that's different in rural properties versus just a regular in-town home?
Obviously, you have a septic system, and I don't personally do the septic inspection. To properly inspect the septic, it should be pumped out and empty so that you can check the baffles. And before it's pumped out, you gotta pretty much flood the system to make sure the drain field is not saturated. I would recommend having a septic guy come and inspect the septic tank. And then if you're on a rural property with no rural water, South Central water, you have a well. So you're always going to want to test that water to make sure that there's no bacteria from the septic wicking back into the well water. And you shouldn't be drinking that if that's happening. So,
How about other types of homes, like luxury homes or higher end homes? Are there certain things that you see with those that I guess this isn't necessarily exclusive to luxury homes, but I'm thinking of like swimming pools, hot tubs. Do you inspect any of that, or how much do you do at all?
yeah, I normally don't do swimming pools or hot tubs. There's a requirement for an outlet within a hot tub, the distance from a hot tub. So if that outlet is too close to the hot tub, I will flag that. But typically I don't do hot tubs, pools, or spas or anything like that.
Do you have any other things that you inspect besides just a visual home inspection, like mold or radon, or can you
Yeah,
give me any of those?
radon testing is huge. So radon gases is a type of gas in a house. Over long-term exposure, it could cause lung cancer. So I do have several radon machines. You put in a house for 48 hours, and then we'll get an instant reading of the radon levels. Typically, to get rid of the radon, there's a mitigation system that can be installed, and you're probably looking at $1,200 to $2,000, depending on the application. So, mold testing, I will physically look for mold, and I also have a moisture test that I go around the windows and the walls and floors, and I also have a thermal imaging camera that I use to find any water intrusions or moisture issues throughout the house as well.
And is it water quality test? Do you do anything like that, or lead?
No, lead is hard to, like in older homes. Where do you stop and where do you start? Because you would have to scrape the walls, the trim, the fascia, the soffit, everything, and take a sample to a lab. So that's a hard inspection.
Sure. One other thing that's a little bit of a benefit to the buyers, maybe not so much to the inspectors, and sometimes it can be, is that if a house has been already under contract and then it gets sold again because it either didn't pass inspection, they fixed it, put it back on the market, came back on again. One of the things is that they can come to you and ask you for just to go through it again with them, and they not have to necessarily pay for a whole double inspection. We only have about 15 seconds, Dell, but if you
Yeah, that happens quite a bit. You do an inspection and the buyer backs out, and then somebody else puts an offer in, and I did the inspection. We just go back and do a quick walkthrough and go over my findings. So
yeah,
save some money that way as well.
And we are going to talk a little bit about hot properties that are on the market right now, just either recently just came on the market, or going to be coming on the market. We'll mention a few of them. We can't obviously be specific about some of the up-and-coming properties because we need to have listing contracts for that. But we can tell you some general things that are going to come out that are exciting. So I'm going to start with first property. We're going to have three of them that we're going to showcase here. And this is a Century 21 listing, but some of the properties that I'm highlighting they're just beautiful, spectacular homes, and it's just really cool to give our viewers an idea of what's out there and some uniqueness of these kinds of properties. So this is one that's on Promontory Point area, and it's listed at $1.395 million. This has an indoor pool, a beautiful location. Look at the square footage on that, just massive and beautiful home. And this one, again, is with Kathy Wagner in our office. So thank you, Kathy, for that. Appreciate that. And Dell, you've done some of those kinds of homes that are pretty high end.
Yes.
Give us your thoughts on you going through them, and that's the house you live in, right?
Not even close.
So with those, do you find a lot of things wrong with those kind of homes, or are they usually pretty
They're pretty
solid.
They're pretty sound, is my opinion. Like I said, when you do a newer home, you find some nickel and dime stuff, but typically upper grade home is, you don't find a lot wrong with them.
Yeah. And before we left the break, I had mentioned that you have a 1-year warranty, and I should clarify that is because once you explain your warranty, because you would tell me before the break, but
So typically, if you buy a brand new home, the builder provides a 1-year warranty. So a lot of people call me about 10, 11 months into it, and they have me come do a full home inspection, and then they can just give that report to the builder, and then the builder normally comes and takes care of everything. So I offer a 1-year warranty home inspection for new builds.
yeah. I don't know if we can pull up that second property now. This one is in Crown Butte area, just north of the Crown Butte. So we're looking about 6 miles, 7 miles west of Mandan. Look at this. It's just a gorgeous view on this property. This has 19 acres, a little more than 19 acres. The really cool thing, and why I brought this one as unique property, is that it has free water for life on the property.
Wow.
Free water for life. So you can see in that there's a little kind of a, I call it a tower, but a reservoir. It has a nice shop. It's got 3 or 4 different outbuildings, and it's actually separate parcels. But the reason why it has free water for life is because the people in Crown Butte have made a deal with this landowner saying, if we put the reservoir for our water on your land, will you let us, we'll give you free water. And that was a pretty cool property. And they just also, that was one of my listings, and they just also got it approved by the county to be able to get it so that you could have 2 properties on there instead of 1. So now you can subdivide it, you could buy it and sell off the other half of it, and that makes it really lucrative in terms of if you're looking as an investor of that kind of property. So very unique situation there. In that one, Dell, that they'll have, is Ritchie water system or something like that? Or
Yep.
They'll have some sort of, typically in rural properties, they have something like that where they can.
Yeah, a Ritchie water is like where your horses or cattle or whatever can drink out of it. It's a fountain with a heater so it doesn't freeze.
Yeah. And this particular property, they've run pipes all over it too, because they're obviously taking advantage of the free water, and which is great for horses. It's a horse property. You could use it for other things too, but it's meant for horse properties. And so this particular property is more rectangular shape. It's got some terrain to it, little terrain to it. And so if you're looking for something to partially invest in and then have it as your own or the whole thing, this is a really unique opportunity. Have you, in general, do you typically do a lot of rural properties when you're doing inspections? Or?
Oh, yeah, I do, for sure. Rural properties, in town, out of town. Yeah, and it's just not homes. It's like apartment buildings and commercial buildings. And
No.
yeah. There's a guy in a farm that called me about 3-4 years ago. It was a pole barn somebody built, and he didn't think it was built quite right. So I actually inspected a pole barn for a farmer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you find it? It's poles and dirt and.
The problem was the rafters were too far apart,
Okay.
and he was worried about snow weight,
And he was right.
and he was right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes, Dell, you'll transition to a different professional if you're like an electrician, or do you get a structural engineer involved or ask would that one be involved?
Well, for sure. If there's like bowling foundations, a structural engineer will actually come and evaluate it and see how bad it is, or the structural engineer will actually, if it needs to be repaired, he will draw up a blueprint of what needs to be done to fix it so that it becomes sound again.
One of the things that I chuckle about a little bit, I think, is we become professionals in our area and become really good in our area. That's a constant mitigation of risk that you're never giving advice beyond your expertise. I always kiss myself. I know enough to be dangerous. Of course, I've been in enough of your presentations, Dell, to know, okay, shut up, Will, and now it's his turn. You hear it so much, you see it and you're like 99% sure. I went to the doctor for heart checkup just because I'm getting old, got a little gray hair. It was funny because I talked to the nurse and they're like, can I see my results? And I already knew the answer. No, you can't tell me anything. And I said, can I get a caramel roll when I leave here? or am I going to be put on a gurney somewhere? It's just, every professional just has to be really careful. And
Yes.
as much as I hear what you say all the time, at the end of the day, like, you are the professional. And all the time, even though I think there's something that's, 99% of the time I hear him say A, B, or C, at the end of the day, there are times when I'm not right. And even though I've heard it many times, it's always very situational. That's why it's always good for us to be handing it off to the next expert.
Correct. Yeah.
So
For sure.
whether that's electrical or plumbing, I'll see a lot of times on your report, Dell, you'll say, consult an expert, or I recommend you contact a roofer. I recommend you contact an insurance company to check on that. I'll recommend a structural engineer, environmental engineer. I've seen, I had a structural and an environmental on one property.
Wow.
One time where it was creosote. They had built under the home, off to the side of the home, but in the earth, these railroad ties that they had completely built this shelter. It was like a cooler, a potato cellar, or a cellar, and a cellar with a C. And the whole thing was made up of creosote.
Ties.
And they weren't sure if it was structural. And so we had a structural engineer, we had an environmental. I thought the deal was just totally toast. But you get a professional in there, and that was the recommendation. Get a professional to give you advice, and we did. And it's great and beautiful how it works, that you transition from a problem, you get the right people and the right professionals involved.
Yeah. Every issue you find in the house, I always say, get an electrician, get an HVAC guy. I find cracks in the heat exchangers all the time, and I always say, get a heating and air company in here to evaluate and repair or replace, and that's real common practice.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to go to our third hot property on the list, if we can cut to that. So this is a very interesting, and this is what I laugh at when I see some of these really unique properties, because you look at this and, oh, okay, it's a house with. So the reason why this is really interesting is because, so it has a 4.1% assumable mortgage on this one, and it was sold, it went to a sheriff's auction. No one bid on it at the sheriff's auction. The list price is $45. I had a comparative analysis at $600. It's a building, it's in the fringe between residential and commercial. It is zoned commercial for commercial use. But the crazy thing about this, not just as assumable mortgage, is it went to the sheriff's auction, and at the sheriff's auction, they weren't able to sell it. And so there's a lot of opportunity to wheel and deal on this one. Like I said, we're currently sitting at 45. Have you ever been to a sheriff's sale, or sheriff's auction?
I've been to a few of them.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you ever buy anything?
I never bought one at a sheriff auction. I bought some HUD homes in my day, but that's about it.
Okay. Did you bid on anything? Or were you just there out of curiosity?
I was there out of curiosity.
Okay.
Typically, yeah.
I was at my first one 2 weeks ago. I've dealt with problems that have resulted from sheriff's auctions, but I will say this, and I just want to tell the viewers, I've had a couple deals in the past where I've been to a sheriff's auction, and they're very appealing. You look at the purchase price, but you gotta be so careful, because when you leave that sheriff's auction, you need to make sure you have a deed that's something that's marketable deed. I've had relatives who purchased at a sheriff's auction, and after they purchased it, there was something wrong with the sheriff's auction. There was something wrong with the process, and they actually got sued by the previous owners, because that's the only thing they could do to get it out of that, get it into a deed where they could resolve the issues. And so, what a mess. You do things right, and you can still get burned even if you do things right. Dell, thank you for joining us today. And is there anything else? We got about 15 seconds left. Any parting words?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Appreciate your time.
Thank
and you. Maybe come on again if we ever need you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for joining us on Open Range, and we will see you next time.
What's going on, everybody? Dr. Jay Schmitz back with another Freedom Health Talk on Open Range. Today is going to be an interesting topic. It's going to be more mental health related as opposed to like physical health that I normally talk about. I think this is an important topic, especially this time of year, especially when we're talking about that it's the winter season and people are doing less of the things they should be doing correctly and more of the things, I don't want to say wrong, but just not as many good things that they should be doing for their health. And because of that, you're more likely to get sick. Now, one of the things that will cause you to get sick faster than anything else, one of the things, is stress will absolutely suppress your immune system because it's supposed to. Again, it's hormone based. It's an adrenal gland function. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Cortisol says fight or flight. I need to run. I need to again, imagine, I always tell people when it comes to cortisol and the stress response is imagine you're out camping and I don't camp. I don't, so you'll probably tell based on but you're in a tent and the tent is zipped so you can't see outside. You're in the woods, you're having a good time, you're just out there doing your thing, you're sleeping, and then all of a sudden you hear something outside of your tent. And then you go, that doesn't sound right. And you kind of look like zip and you peek out and it's a bear, right? So now the hormone that gets released incredibly quickly is cortisol. And what that's supposed to do is it's supposed to get you prepared to either fight the bear or run away, fight or flight. And again, that's a normal physiological response to what's happening. Because if that didn't happen, you wouldn't be able to run away, right? You wouldn't have enough sugar in your muscles to be able to support your flight in this case, or fight if you're dumb. So that always reminds me, like every single year I have this meme that pops up on my Facebook and I laugh every single time. And I try to share it every single time that I see it. And I see it sometimes randomly, but it's this thing that says, how do you fight a bear? And it goes through the steps 1 through 8. And it's first things you do is you get up close to the bear. The second thing you do when it swipes at you, you duck up underneath its arm. You go in for a rear naked choke while the bear goes down. You just kind of let it go to sleep and then you run, right? And then step 7 basically says you wake up because you actually wake up, you just died, right? The bear killed you at step number 1. So it's some version of that. I laugh every single time I see that meme. It just gets me every time. But the point is fight or flight. So you're going to flight. That's the whole point. And that's a normal response we're supposed to have. It's a good thing. But what happens when we don't ever turn the stressor off, right? It's because back into the bear scenario, assuming you get away from the bear, take a little bit of time, your pulse comes down, you calm down, right? That nozzle turns off, the cortisol goes away, or it turns down, and then you get back to calm, rest and digest. So you have fight or flight and rest and digest, right? 2 separate things. Gas pedal and the brake. So 2 separate things. And so what happens when we have emotional or psychological stress is that the gas is on all the time, which means we have ramped up cortisol all the time. So that's something that is consistent in the stress response. And what happens then is because of that, think about it. When you're being chased by a bear, do you need an immune system? No. Do you need a digestive system? No. You need to survive the bear. So cortisol then hijacks all of those other functions that you don't need in that moment and turns them off or severely suppresses them. You never really turn them off, but suppresses them. So if your stress is ramped up, that's suppressing your immune system, making you more likely to get sick. And I wanted to talk about this, and I swear I have people ask me this all the time. What's your stance on, or what's your view on? And then they'll ask me some question related to what's been happening in Minnesota, or not that long ago, the Charlie Kirk thing, or, what President Trump did, whatever. And Congress was doing, or the Senate, this one senator said, or this one. Okay. At the end of the day, I have some rules. And these are things that I have had to apply to my life because of the stress that's caused by me thinking about what idiots are doing somewhere else. Okay. And again, I'm not even going to speak about my viewpoint on all of these things because that's not germane to this topic. What my point though is that I can do nothing about those things. You can do nothing about those things. There's not a single thing that you can do any way, shape, or form to change what President Trump chooses to do or what Congress chooses to do. And again, I voted for President Trump. That said, that doesn't mean I agree with every single decision. I also don't spend any time, like 0 time, thinking about the decisions that he is making. Neither did I think about the decisions that Biden made before him. By the way, I did not vote for Biden. My point, though, regardless of whether you agree or disagree, the only thing that's going to happen by you focusing on what's going down in DC or in Minnesota with the ice situation or even the Charlie Kirk thing, like the only thing that happens is it ramps up your stress response and it makes you less likely to be healthy. That's it. So I have rules here. And so I was like, I'm going to break this down for you. The way that I think about issues, right? So if somebody says, what do you think about whatever? The first thing I think is this affecting my family or my friends, right? Because if it's not affecting my family and my friends, I'm like, is it something that I really want to care about? Okay. So from there, I'll say, is it affecting my community? Is this specifically affecting my community in any way? So it's got to pass. If it's no to that, and I said, is it affecting my city? Because then again, I might care about it if it's affecting my city, but it might not be affecting my community or me personally or anybody that I know. But if it's affecting my city, it still might be important and something to consider. For example, city commission, right? I feel strongly about who's going to get elected for our Fargo City Commission, but that doesn't necessarily, it affects me, but not like directly is affecting me, but it's still something that's important to me, if that makes sense. The last one is, does it affect our state? I don't go past that. I don't, at the end of the day, and I've told people this, you may disagree with me and that's fine, right? We're allowed to disagree with each other. I'm just helping you understand how to have a greater peace of mind and have less stress over the things that are happening outside of your control. At the end of the day, as long as our state, as long as our governor is willing to advocate for our state, as long as our legislature is doing the right thing, we have judges, our own Supreme Court judges, justices here in North Dakota. And as long as those things are working the way they're supposed to, we can be insulated from a lot of the things that are happening in DC. That's why it's most important is the state down, right, towards me. And I don't mean it from a selfish perspective. I just mean it that it has to be affecting me at a deep level for me to really ramp that part of me up. And again, remember those four things. So me, my friends and my family, then it's the community, then it's the city, and then it's the state. Obviously, you guys have followed me. I'm sure you know this. I care deeply about the state legislature bills. And I call myself a health advocate and testifying on a lot of bills already in the last decade or so. I think that's extremely important. And I'll spend my time on that. But generally speaking, even ask my wife this, I usually tell her I'm only going to pick a handful of bills because you can easily get stuck spending hours a day on all of the 1,000 bills. But I try to pick only a handful, maybe 10, whatever, that are important enough that I'll spend my time messing with them, if that makes sense. So my question then is, if you can't do anything about it, and it doesn't have to be a politics thing, I'm just using that as the example. Maybe it's something where, it doesn't, put whatever you want in there. If it's something that you absolutely cannot affect, you can't change it, there's not a single thing you can do about it, there's nobody that you know that can directly affect it, and there's probably nobody who knows somebody who can directly, especially if we're talking like the president or Congress, then you can't, I would say, don't worry about it. It doesn't mean that you don't think about it. It just means that you don't worry about it. Those are two separate things. I can think about something and not worry about it because I know that I can't change it. So there's no point wasting my brain space on trying to be stressed about something that I can't change. I've seen this all the time. I've seen a lot with friends, especially if you go on Facebook. I see this all the time with people where they're panicking or freaking out about something that's happening in somewhere elseville. And I'm like, you can't do anything about it. So why are you wasting your emotional stress response on it? Right. And it doesn't mean if you say, I care deeply about this country, you can, but you caring about this country and stressing about it, and me caring about my country and not stressing about it, there's no difference there because neither of us can do a single thing about it. So the whole point of this entirety of this Freedom Health Talk is, how can you develop a stronger mental health, tamp down that stress response, and help yourself have more peace over your day, in your week, your month? Again, because worrying about something that you can't control is insane. You're just going to drive yourself nuts. But my joke is with my kiddos, and they say, where are we going, Dad? I'm like, we're going crazy. It's a short trip. But that's the point, is that there's nothing you can do about it. So don't fret over it. Don't stress over it. Just have it come in, answer those 4 questions. Is it affecting you and your family? friends, community, city, or state. If it's not any of those things, I would say let it go. Just don't worry about it. Let it go. It's not for you to handle. That's going to build a huge amount of peace in your life. And it's going to allow you to just burden yourself from the things that don't really matter, especially not to you. This has been Dr. Jake Schmitz with another mental freedom health talk, or freedom mental health talk on Open Range. Again, unburden yourself, make the right next decision, and you're going to find that your health and your life improves drastically. All right, love you guys. Till next time.